couple weeks ago I gave you guys the 100 days update on my first ever saltwater aquarium, the one with macroalgae. Today it's time for the 100 day update on my first ever reef tank. So earlier this year I took my first step into the saltwater aquarium hobby and I set up a macroalgae tank. To me this seemed like a good place to start, and I was also told by other people that setting up and maintaining a macroalgae tank is quite easy. And now, like a few months later, I can indeed confirm it is not very difficult. But as I continued doing more and more research on saltwater, I got really fascinated by corals as well. So I made the decision to set up a second saltwater tank and dive into the beautiful world of corals. I was looking for a tank that would fit well on the shelf, and I ended up buying a Waterbox Cube 10. This is a nice all-in-one aquarium measuring 35 by 36 by 35 centimeters, so it holds roughly 40 liters or 10 US gallons. It has a filtration compartment in the back and it already comes supplied with a return pump and some filter media. It does not come with a light, so I got a new Blade Coral Grow from Aqua Illumination. This is a nice app-controlled light with separate royal, blue and cool white channels. I also got a big box of reef rock from Aquaforest to make the Hardscaping. After some trial and error, I came up with something that looks pretty decent, so I decided to lock everything together with cotton pads and super glue. Lastly, I added in the sand. I used live sand from Aquaforest, which comes supplied with some bottled beneficial bacteria. After that it was time to work on the filtration chamber. The Waterbox Cube 10 basically comes with everything you need. I just added a good amount of biomedia to the middle compartment. Now in terms of equipment, I really wanted to keep the setup simple. I was also planning to keep easy corals only, so I decided to not use a protein skimmer. On day one I did make one big mistake. I placed the heater in the last compartment where the return pump is. But little did I know that in this compartment the water level fluctuates the most. So a couple days after the tank was filled up, I heard a weird sound coming from the tank. And obviously that was the heater. The water level in that compartment had dropped significantly and the heating element was only partially submerged. Luckily I noticed it right away, but if that would have happened in the middle of the night, I'm not sure how the story would have ended. Now after setting up the tank and filling it up with water, I basically left it alone for a good month or so. The only thing I did during that time is every day I would add a drop of this. These are just bottled beneficial bacteria. And I would also kind of like ghost feed the tank. So I would just drop in a little bit of fish food and just let that decompose, just to build up some ammonia. And I think if I remember correctly, the light was on for maybe 1 hour per day, just to avoid getting any unnecessary algae. So after about a month, I was getting pretty sick and tired of looking at an empty tank. So I thought surely by now it must be cycled and maybe we can slowly start adding in some inhabitants. So I did a test for nitrite and ammonia and they were still very high. That actually really surprised me because when I set this tank up, I added live sand with beneficial bacteria, I added the biomedia with beneficial bacteria, and I was also adding beneficial bacteria every single day. If you would do all those things in a freshwater setup, like for sure it's going to be cycled. But yeah, saltwater tanks just take a little bit more time to cycle, I guess. On day 45 the tank was finally cycled, so I rushed to my favorite store and my plan was to go home with some beautiful corals. And to be honest with you, at this point I wasn't even thinking about fish yet. I guess that's because I'm coming from the freshwater hobby, where you start with hardscape, then you add the plants and then you add the fish. So I was thinking the same for saltwater. First the hardscape, then the corals and then the fish. But the guys at the store told me that with saltwater you usually start with some fish. I guess to build up a little bit of nitrate and phosphate, then once those parameters are stable, then you start adding corals. So all of a sudden I found myself looking at the nanofish department. After speaking to the guys to see what would be a good fit for this small tank, I went home with a beautiful neon goby. Now unfortunately I couldn't enjoy my neon goby for a very long time. One day I woke up, I was looking at the tank, couldn't see him anywhere. He also wasn't like lying around the tank anywhere. He had actually managed to swim through the filter intake slots, because it was still very small and only could actually fit through there. So he was just chilling in the filter sock. Not really a big deal of course, but I took him out, placed him back in the tank. And then a few days after, I found him lying on the ground, completely dried up. No idea how that happened because I already had this lid on there. I mean, of course the lid still has some small holes, but I don't think he should manage to fit through there. So I think he actually went back into the filter compartment and then jumped out from there, because the filter compartment doesn't have a lid, of course. So I was pretty bummed out and the tank was empty again. But shortly after that I took a little trip to Portugal, to the Lisbon Aquarium, mainly to visit the 40-meter aquascape by Takashi Amano, but I also really wanted to see the saltwater exhibition. And that was actually a lot better than I expected. They had some really beautiful displays with corals, with macroalgae, with some beautiful fish as well. So that kind of gave me new motivation to continue with my setup as well. After my accident with the neon goby, I wasn't ready for new fish yet, but I knew that my water parameters were good, so I just wanted to get a small coral to see how it would do in my tank. And this is what I got. The store couldn't tell me with 100% certainty what it was, but it was either pulsing xenia or Antellia. Now both of these are some of the easiest corals you can keep, so I was hopeful it would do well. Unfortunately though, it did not seem to like my tank, because 2 days later it looked like this, and 3 days later it was completely gone. So after my neon goby jumping out and my first piece of coral not making it either, I was definitely a bit discouraged, but wasn't ready to give up just yet. I decided to upgrade my tank with some new equipment. One thing that is very important for a reef tank is stable water parameters. And because reef tanks usually don't have a lid or a cover, you get a lot of evaporation. And with evaporation you get fluctuations in the salinity levels, because the water evaporates but the salt stays in the tank, so that's not good. Because of that, I decided to add an auto top-off system. I found a perfect little container that could act as a reservoir, made a hole in the lid, placed the pump inside and moved everything underneath the shelf. I filled the reservoir with RO water, placed a sensor in the last filter compartment, and that's the auto top-off installed. I also wanted a little bit more flow in the tank, so I got this really nice little Wavemaker from Aquillumination. Now for transparency, the auto top-off system and the Wavemaker were sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and I didn't pay for these items. So with the new upgrades in place and the water parameters looking good, I decided to keep moving forward. I went to one of my local fish shops to look for another beginner coral and I found a really nice Kenya tree. This should be a very hardy, easy to keep and fast growing coral as well, so I said to myself, if this one also dies, I'm throwing in the towel and giving up on my coral reef adventure. Luckily everything went well and this new coral seemed to be very happy in my tank. So that gave me the confidence to get a few more corals. I found an online store that offered same-day delivery, so I placed an order for some really nice beginner corals. They were shipped the next day and arrived later in the evening. Everything was packaged really well, but of course all the corals were completely stressed and closed, so it was really hard to see anything. So I just quickly unpacked them, acclimated them and placed them in the tank. Okay, so normally when you buy corals, you always need to do a so-called coral dip. So you buy these new corals, then before you add them into your tank, you prepare a little saltwater bath, you add a coral dipping solution, and then you place the corals in there, let them sit for like 15 minutes or so. This is supposed to kill any like hitchhikers. Now, this is supposed to be completely safe for the coral itself, it should only harm those little critters, those hitchhikers. But I'm not entirely sure about that, because I did this coral dip with that first piece of coral that I got, the Xenia or Antellia or whatever it was. And after the dip, like, it was completely stressed, so I think that's maybe one of the reasons why it actually died, but I can't say for sure. But with this next shipment of corals that I got, I just didn't do any coral dip, just because I didn't really feel safe, you know. The next day all the corals had opened up a bit, so I can show you what I got. We have pulsing xenia, clove polyps, green star polyps, a toadstool leather coral and some yellow polyps. Now whenever you buy corals, they always come attached to a little rock or a so-called frag plug. And obviously these things are a little unsightly, so you want to remove them and then glue the corals to the final location on the rock. Okay guys, just came back from a pretty successful shopping trip. I have a few bags laid out here in front of me, and I thought I'd just quickly grab the camera and show you guys what I got before I start acclimating things and putting them into the tank. So let's start with this one over here. In this bag we have a feather duster worm. So right now it just looks like a tube, but this should be pretty cool. In the next bag we have a shell, and in that shell we have my first ever hermit crab. Super excited about that. Then we have a small bag. In here we have a beautiful piece of red macroalgae. It's not going in here. This one will go in my macroalgae tank. Then we have a coral. In here we have a mushroom coral. And the last one, in here we have quite a big piece of rock. But on the rock are like 4 or 5 rhodactis mushrooms. These look so good in the shop, like super green color, so I had to take them home as well. Now if you get corals attached to a big rock like this, you definitely want to do a coral dip. This rock is full of holes and you have no idea what kind of pests could be living in there. So here I just take a container with half a liter of salt water, place the rock in there, and then I add 5 milliliters of coral dip. After that you just want to agitate the water as much as possible to make sure this solution gets in all the little gaps and crevices. After 10 to 15 minutes you take it out, rinse it in some clean salt water, and then you can place it in your tank. And here we are at day 100 of my first ever reef tank. Honestly, it's still quite hard to believe actually. It's been quite a journey. As you can see, I've added a few more corals. I found another online store that had a really good midsummer sale. So they had some really good deals on some corals, which of course I couldn't resist. But we still don't have any fish yet. And there's actually a very good reason for that. As I'm making this video, I'm actually about to go on holiday for almost 2 weeks. So it just doesn't make sense to buy fish right now, you know. So after we come back from holiday, I might go look for something. So if you guys have any suggestions, then let me know in the comments. I need something that's big enough so it doesn't fit through these gaps of the lid, and also big enough so it doesn't fit through the slots of the filter intake. To be honest with you, these past few months have been a lot of fun actually, from starting to do your research, to setting up the tank, to getting your first coral, getting your first fish, to now having a well-established tank with a decent coral collection, I would say. It's definitely a collection, I think. Yeah, it's just been a lot of fun, you know. Like there were definitely some hiccups along the way as well, but I guess it's with every new adventure that you start, there's always going to be some hiccups. I'm sure I'm going to get some questions from people like how is salt water compared to fresh water? And I wouldn't say that it's more difficult, but it's just a little bit more work. Like simple things like a water change, for example. There's just a few more steps involved, you know, like you need to prepare the RO water, then you need to measure out the salt, then you need to mix everything. If you're doing it really well, you also want to bring it up to temperature. It's a little bit more work than opening up a tap, filling up a bucket and pouring it in the tank, you know. So yeah, salt water is definitely not more difficult, just a little bit more work. I think that's the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed this 100 days update. If you did enjoy it, then don't forget to smash the like button. As always, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.